Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, dear Kardec Radio listeners. This is Marco Magalhães talking to you straight from Toronto, Canada. And I know most of you are probably thinking, well, this doesn't sound like Vanessa, and you're right, absolutely right. I'm filling in for Vanessa and Celoni today. But we have ahead of us a very, very interesting show where we're going to be talking about Thomas Paine and the Spiritist thought. But before we go there, let us go back and talk a little bit more about Kardec. Allan Kardec that brought to us the consolidation of all the Spiritist thoughts and ideas. And one of the things he raised, which is very interesting, very important for us, especially today, is that unshakable faith is only that which can face reason in all human epochs. So, dear friends, let us never forget this. Unshakable faith. Reason. This is what we're going to be talking about today. One of the contributions of Thomas Paine. And I also want to bring to you one very important thing in the Spirit's book. In all 1,095 questions present in this book, where we have all the information that we need about Spiritism, about the importance of science and religion. And we're going to focus more and more on these topics today. And this is a very special day. And the reason why, because we have here with us, in a minute, Luis Salazar Jr. And he's going to be bringing his experience and his knowledge on Thomas Paine and the Spiritist thought. And for those of you who don't know, Thomas Paine, as one of the many contributions he had during his life, he was participated in his thoughts were important during the American Revolution, French Revolution, Industrial Revolution, one of the founding fathers, and some of his ideas are embedded in our society today, in our thoughts. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So let us listen to this message, and then right after that, we're going to have Luis Salazar here with us. Stay on.
Only today. Throughout your whole life, you will never have another day like today. Remember this, and attend to all good that you can do. Be useful by helping someone. Pay heed to your duties. Happiness and peace, hope and care are what you wish to sow in your path. Joy and favor are gifts that you wish to offer. Relationships that you need to mend, courtesy at home, the most simple and the most demanding work. Review, readjustment, corrections, forgiveness, signs of care and esteem, spiritual support during the work that you embrace and bless. Not one of these things should you delay or leave for later, because time will not return. In a day like today, you only have once.
So, dear Kardec Radio listener, in this beautiful morning here, talking to you straight from Toronto, Canada, filling in for Vanessa and Celoni today. Here I am, Marco Magalhães, one of the hosts here in the Kardec Radio, and we're going to go over a very, very interesting topic, a very interesting idea. And we have here with us today Luis Salazar Jr. And now we're going to bring him in, and we're going to start talking a little bit more about this interesting topic, which is so interesting for all of us, not only spiritists, but everyone that wants to understand a little bit more about our history and our history in religions and science and politics. Hello, Luis. How are you?
Hi, how are you? I'm doing very well. Glad to be here.
Very good to hear. It's a pleasure to have you here. And I think just to get started for all of us, let us talk a little bit about you first. So tell us a little bit about your life as a spiritist and for how many years you've been studying and practicing spiritism.
So I'm currently 20 years old, about to turn 21. I grew up in a spiritist household. I'm from Miami, Florida, and I now live in Washington, D.C., where I go to school. And ever since I remember, spiritism has been a part of the household, what my parents and I talk about, and just a way of life. And that has led me to, when I read things about history in class or whatnot, to think about how that relates to spiritism, and that's how this talk originated.
That is so interesting, and I think the first question that I have for you, which I found quite amazing when I looked at some of your work now in the presentations, that the way you describe how did you meet Thomas Paine, and can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, so that process actually happened many years ago. I was about 13 or 14. And it was a very personal experience in which I was in class one day, I think 8th grade, and I read a sentence about Thomas Paine and how he wrote Common Sense and how that led to the American Revolution. But there's only one sentence in the entire history book. And so I decided to research a little more and find out about him. And I stumbled upon a book he wrote called Age of Reason. And I read parts of that book, and it was so clear that there was a link between that and Spiritism. And that's what I'm here today to share with you, what I found and how interesting that was.
Oh, great. And also, so can you tell us a little bit more about Thomas Paine? For those of us who may be not familiar with the history, can you just enlighten us a little bit about who was Thomas Paine?
Sure. So Thomas Paine was actually born in England in late January, early 1700s, and he had a very illustrious career in which he flew to he was born in Norfolk, England, and then he flew to London, met Benjamin Franklin, then came over to the United States about the age of 40 or so, and began noticing what was going on in the colonies. And through that experience, he ended up writing an anonymous pamphlet, as they call it, called Common Sense. And that was his first main work, and that led to people getting together to fight against the British and began the American Revolution. He was then exiled and went to France, and there his ideas also permeated in France and also led to the French Revolution. So this man was actually a part of two major revolutions in the Western Hemisphere in one lifetime. And unfortunately, we do not talk about him too much in history. He's not regarded as a founding father. But putting aside what is known to most, which is his political side, his ability to write and galvanize the people, there's actually another side of Thomas Paine, which is the one I'm more interested in talking about, which is his religious side or spiritual side. Oftentimes, people have believed that he was an atheist or, didn't believe in religion. But as we'll learn today, he was very, very careful in how he explained his thoughts. And his thoughts were very different than what was custom back in those days. And it's so similar to what we later find with Allan Kardec and Spiritism that it bears us to look into what he wrote and how that connects and how beautiful all that is.
Wow, that is very interesting, and I think it's you're very right, and it's so important for us understanding that how Thomas Paine started the Common Sense as a pamphletist, basically an anonymous pamphlet, and all of a sudden that triggered a whole philosophical change in thought that ended up with the revolution, and as very well explained, not only here in America but in France too. But now, again, you brought a very important aspect of the whole talk today, which is actually connecting or bridging the ideas of Thomas Paine and Allan Kardec. And can you bring us a little bit more onto the connections between Thomas Paine and Allan Kardec?
Yes, definitely. So in his writing called Age of Reason, which he wrote about 20 years after Common Sense, he moved away from the politics and the revolution and focused more on what I would call kind of a liberation or revolution within spirituality. Because in those times it was very difficult to talk against religion. And if we just pick out things that he wrote, we find he says that reason must come before faith. He says that in the Age of Reason. And that's why his book is called Age of Reason, because similar to the Enlightenment period, he focused on being reasoned when you have faith. And then about 50 years later, we know, as was mentioned, Allan Kardec says, faith alone is blind faith if there is no reason. And as you mentioned at the beginning of the show, we know that unshakable faith, and I quote, unshakable faith is only that which can meet reason face to face in every human epoch. So if you hear those two quotes, they're pretty much saying the same thing. And understanding that you need to reason in order to have true faith is something which the religion of Christianity or the Catholic Church doesn't really focus on. And this is something very revolutionary within our religion. And to see that Thomas Paine thought about that even before Allan Kardec is astonishing and just beautiful to notice.
Well, So it's just interesting, and it's important that to explain to some of the listeners that for many years, for thousands of years, reason has been neglected and removed from the religious concepts and ideas. So for many centuries, we were allowed to think. We were mostly only allowed to follow predetermined rules and guidelines that were being taught to us for a long time. So isn't it amazing that Thomas Paine actually was not only a revolutionary in the common sense idea, but also in the way he sees spirituality per se?
Correct. And that's what makes his work and his lifetime that much more important, even in what we're discussing today, which is not only was this man a part of two political revolutions, but we can actually say he was a part of a greater revolution, which was to think, to reason. And to go further into his ideas, it wasn't just the idea of reasoning, which came with the Enlightenment and whatnot. We can actually, and as I have in this PowerPoint, and I'll read parts of it, we have many different topics which the Spiritist doctrine goes over, and that includes God, to begin with, first question in the Spirit's book. So what is God? God is the supreme intelligence, first cause of all things. Thomas Paine says, the only idea man can affix to the name of God is that of a first cause, the cause of all things. Sounds like the same exact thing.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah.
And then I'll go further into other topics. The soul. What is a soul? We believe in the Spiritist doctrine to believe in the soul, in its immortality, in the pre-existence of the soul. Thomas Paine says, I believe in one God and no more, and I hope for happiness beyond this life. So kind of looking forward and into that afterlife.
Exactly.
And we have that with God, with the idea of good and bad, with the idea of equality. And one that really stuck out to me more than anything were two particular topics, which were free will, which is a big notion that we need to remember in the Spiritist doctrine, the idea that we are given free will to act. And with that comes consequences for our own actions. And Thomas Paine says the doctrine of original sin takes away all of man's free will. So he goes directly towards the idea of the Catholic and Christian notion that because of Adam and Eve, there's original sin and now we are sinners forever. And he directly addresses it. And the greatest, I believe, the greatest thing about Spiritism that we need to remember is the idea that we have two different worlds. We do communicate with spirits. We are spirits. And that's where the name Spiritism comes from, the spirit's communications, and that we can communicate with spirits. And we believe in the Spiritist doctrine that the spirit's relations with human beings are constant and, quote, have always existed. Thomas Paine tells us there are two distinct classes of what are called thoughts. Those that we produce in ourselves by reflection and the act of thinking, and those that bolt into the mind of their own accord. I have always made it a rule to treat those voluntary visitors with civility, taking care to examine, as well as I was able, if they are worth entertaining. And it is from that I have acquired almost all the knowledge that I have.
Wow, that's certainly a great idea and interesting topic. And let's hold on to that thought, and we're going to have a little break now. And just in a few minutes, we'll be back, and we're going to be talking more about Thomas Paine and the Spirit thought. And we're going to specifically go over now, like we discussed now, the Spiritist communications and overall the divine laws, the existence of Christ, and free will, because we have to remember that free will is really the major tool and the only tool we have to really learn. Okay, so Luis Salazar, we'll take a little break, and we'll be back with you in a few minutes, okay?
Perfect.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Getting to the Light, Spiritist Therapy for Discarnate Spirits is a small book that offers guidance to Spiritist practitioners and Spiritist counselors. Purchase your copy at www.ssbaltimore.org.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
If you missed out on a previous shows, no worries. We have an on-demand section of all previous shows and interviews. Go to our website at www.kardecradio.com.
Spread the word. Kardec Radio, to learn more about Spiritism.
Help prevent suicide by reading and sharing these books with others. 2 great books are available to help in this Kardec Radio campaign to prevent suicide. Suicide, All You Need to Know, by the international Spiritist speaker Richard Simonetti. You can buy your copy at www.roundtablepublishing-uk.com. Also, Memoirs of a Suicide by the medium Yvonne Pereda. Buy your copy today at www.ediceiofamerica.com.
Kardec Radio, live every Saturday at 11 a.m.
Kardec Radio now offers more programs during the week and weekends. Every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you can follow the beautiful program God at Home with Francisca Kranz and the British Spiritist community. They will brighten your days by doing a God at Home meeting wherever you are in the world, while teaching you how to do the same in your own home with your family and friends. Every Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you will hear incredibly inspirational Spiritist talks directly broadcasted by Spiritist Network. They will be true educational moments to carry out to immortality. Every Saturday, live interviews, Bridging Health and Spiritism with the host Dr. Vanessa Anceloni. You may ask questions to the interviewed guests by calling 858-769-4705. And every Sunday, tune in the Spiritist Awareness at Kardec Radio. You will hear a series of segments on a diversity of Spiritist topics. Kardec will broadcast the Spiritist Moment with Kirsten DeMello, the reading of the Spiritist book by John DeRosa and Steve Shepard, Spiritism in Your Life with Drs. Marco and Joyce Magalhães, Spiritism and the Gospel with Luis Sergio Marotta, Spiritist Education for Youth and Children with Bernadette Leal, Spiritist Music with James Marotta, Neuroscience and Spiritism with Dr. Vanessa Anceloni, and many more segments coming soon. Enjoy it all and nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
And now we return to our program.
Hello, dear listeners. Here we are speaking to you directly from Toronto, Canada. This is Marco Magalhães, and we're talking about Thomas Paine and the Spiritist thought. And I wanted to bring a passage from the Gospel according to Spiritism, which I think fits really well with what we are discussing today. And this is on chapter 1 from the Gospel according to Spiritism. It's called The Alliance Between Science and Religion. And this is what Allan Kardec says. Science and religion are the two levers of human intelligence. One reveals the laws of the material world, and the other the laws of the moral world. But neither, having the same principle, which is God, can contradict each other. If they were to negate each other, one would necessarily be wrong and the other right, because God could not possibly be willing to destroy God's own work. So it's so interesting. And further on, Allan Kardec also mentions a revolution that is happening. And this is what he says. It is a whole moral revolution that is occurring at this time and is molding people's spirits. After being prepared for over more than 18 centuries, this revolution is nearing its fulfillment and will mark a new era for humankind. The consequences of these revolutions are easy to foresee. As for social relations, it must bring inevitable changes that no person has the power to oppose, because they are in the designs of God and results from the law of progress, which is a law of God. And now we're going to have back with us Luis Salazar to talk a little bit more about Thomas Paine and the Spiritist thought. And Luis, I have a question for you. I know that Thomas Paine had an interest in science too, which is actually, I think, very similar to what Allan Kardec has, one of his main interests. So can you comment on that?
Yes. Actually, Thomas Paine can be said to have been an inventor. He did, in fact, come up with a bridge, an iron bridge, and it was never actually implemented. But he did come up with it. He had a whole model, and he went around trying to present his ideas, and he had some success. And the idea of him being an inventor, he was all around very interested in the ideas of philosophy, science, and goodwill, and doing well unto others. And if I may show you or mention to you another area in which Thomas Paine follows the idea that we believe in Spiritism of science, philosophy, and religion. Those are the three basic tenets of
yeah.
doctrine. And Thomas Paine points out that, I quote, "Every preacher ought to be a philosopher, most certainly, and every house of devotion a school of science."
Mm-hmm.
So the idea that when we talk about religion, when we talk about Spiritism, Christianity, it needs to be in a very thoughtful way. We need to think about and ponder and philosophize. And then even when we devote ourselves to God and to the acts, we also need to do it with the help of science. And the three coming together is what produces what we know to be the Spiritist doctrine. And that's what best allows us to perform to our best ability. And so to hear a inventor, revolutionary, philosopher, writer put all these thoughts together, and then to hear the simple way in which Allan Kardec mentions it continues to tell us something about how we should view our religion, and our doctrine mainly.
Wow.
Always keep those three in mind.
Exactly.
And never more one than the other. We have all three areas, science, philosophy, and religion, have their own specific areas. You go to church, you can consider that religion. What the traditional church, the Catholic Church. Talk about philosophers. If you read many philosophers, wonderful ideas come from that. And then you read scientists. You can mention Albert Einstein and other scientists that have really helped and changed our world. But if you can grasp all that and put it together, that's where you have this beautiful doctrine. That's where this all comes together in one source.
Wow, yeah, you're absolutely right, and it's good that you bring that concept, and that is the basis of Spiritism. That it's a combination of science and religion and philosophy, and the reason why it is so important, because Allan Kardec himself did quite an amazing scientific research in spirituality and mediumistic communications at that time. And I think that's why learning from him, we can build up on that triad of concepts so well.
Right.
And I have one more question, which I found very, very interesting, because Thomas Paine also talked about the plurality of inhabited worlds. Is that correct?
Yes. I was leaving that one for... that was the surprise, or what I consider to be one of the most refreshing topics that he touched upon. That, if you think about it, in 1793, to be able to articulate the idea of inhabited worlds and the plurality of such is very, very different. Now, we do know that astronomers in the past have talked about other planets and whatnot, but to be able to articulate this idea, I found very interesting. So our doctrine states, I'm paraphrasing, but within the universe there are other inhabited worlds with beings at different degrees of evolution, some equal, others more or less evolved than earthly man. So we understand that there are levels. We are not at the bottom necessarily, but we are more or less in the middle. And then Thomas Paine states, quote, "But it is not to us, the inhabitants of this globe only, that the benefits arising from a plurality of worlds are limited. The inhabitants of each of the worlds of which our system is composed enjoy the same opportunities of knowledge as we do." And from here, we see a very clear notion and a very clear idea that Thomas Paine believes in justice. He believes in opportunity. He believes in equality. And those tenets aren't simply for man. So he doesn't believe in equality just for mankind or humankind. He believes in equality for all beings. He believes in opportunity for all who are in our system. And he's very careful to mention system. You know, and that's definitely what it is. It's a system. And we have yet to really be able to point at what it is. But we do understand it's a huge system. And that's where we fit into one section of this called system. And that's why when we find it troubling in the Spiritist doctrine to personify God. And we understand that that's not accurate. It's actually hurtful to our progress to keep God enclosed in this idea of it being a human. And so we're very careful with God being an it. And when we do that, it opens up the gates to believe in something so vast and just unexplainable that we have to resort to words like system. And to bring in a more mainstream idea, I don't know if anyone has been watching Cosmos. It's a pretty well-watched show going on. The scientist Neil deGrasse Tyson is hosting it. And if you just watch one episode of that, you learn how little humans are in this, and how little our history is compared to the history of the world and our solar system and our universe. And so for Thomas Paine in 1793 to mention this is a wonderful step forward and allows us to progress. When someone comes out and says something like that, and then we have Allan Kardec and the Spiritist doctrine affirming that and pushing it forward and giving us even further information. And so they just work in tandem.
Yeah, and I want to add, that was a very interesting idea that you brought up, and I just want to add that in question 10 of the Spirit's book, Allan Kardec asked the Spirits, can human beings fathom God's innermost nature? And the Spirits answered, no, they lack the aptitude to comprehend it. So you're absolutely right. We're still not able even to comprehend the innermost aspects of God, only the characteristics of God, which are immutable, immaterial, unique, all-powerful, and supremely just and good. And I think Thomas Paine, as you mentioned really well, has that same understanding of God as we in Spiritism do. And now I'm just going to hold on, Luis, a couple more minutes. We're going to have another quick break, and we'll continue in this enlightening and interesting talk about Thomas Paine and the Spiritist thoughts. So just hold on for a second. We'll be back with you in a minute, okay?
Sounds good.
We will return to our program after these messages.
New release, Liberation. In this compelling narrative, Andre Luiz emphasizes the work of high-order spirits in the effort to convert the spirit Gregorio to the good, an effort that culminates with the unforgettable re-encounter with his mother, herself a highly evolved spirit, wherein he surrenders to the irresistible call of love. The book also contains information on how unhappy spirits act as they try to involve incarnates in their wiles. The spirit author tells of the intercession of high-order spirits on behalf of human beings, demonstrating the divine compassion that grants to all the blessed opportunity to free themselves by means of study, labor, and persevering service in the practice of the good. Buy your copy today at www.ediceiofamerica.com.
Spread the word. Kardec Radio, to learn more about Spiritism.
Want Spiritist books for your children? At Eddies of America, you will find a collection of them. From the best-selling book, Our Father, in which the Spirit May through Chico Xavier brought countless poems, stories, and folk tales based on the Lord's Prayer, to the beautiful and educational collection by the author Adelson Sales on Back to School and many others. Buy your copy today at www.eddiesayofamerica.com.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
If you missed out on previous shows, no worries. We have an on-demand sections of all previous shows and interviews. Go to our website, www.kardecradio.com.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Spiritism for Everyone is the live web study meeting and educational program of the United States Spiritist Council. This year, in commemoration of the 150th anniversary of the Gospel according to Spiritism, the Spiritism for Everyone program will present an in-depth study of this remarkable book. Join us every Wednesday evening through the web from any computer or mobile device, no matter where you are in the U.S. Spiritism for Everyone is free, open to all, and requires no registration. For more information, go to www.spiritist.us.
And now we return to our program.
Hello, dear listeners. This is Marco Magalis, and we're continue our conversation about Thomas Paine and the Spiritist thought. And we have a question from Kirsten de Mello sent to us to Luis Salazar. And I'll bring you back in, Luis. Are you there? Yes. Okay, yes. So Kirsten has a question, and I think it's a very, very interesting question, is that how was being a Spiritist influenced your choices in the non-Spiritist books you read and study? So basically, being a Spiritist, how does that influence your reading of non-Spiritist work?
So that's a wonderful question, and thank you, Kristen. I think the best way to think about this is just naturally I gravitate more towards nonfiction and history. I believe that the past is very important to understand in order to understand our present and our future. A lot of people feel that way. It's nothing new. But I do believe that when I read things related to politics and socially conscious work, which is what I'm mostly interested in, I read it with a certain eye, through a certain lens, which is where Spiritism comes in. So it's not necessarily what types of books I pick up, but it's how I comprehend and grasp the information I read. And so, there were about 30 kids in that class, and we all talked about Thomas Paine. But I found it very particular that there was only one sentence about Thomas Paine. And that led me to research. And looking back on it, I do know, and this is where Spiritism also helps, not only in going and searching for information, but knowing that you are being guided to find the information. And so my desire to research Thomas Paine may not have just been my desire. it may have been something I needed to do in order to understand who he was and understand the Spiritist doctrine even better. And through that process, I was able to learn about Thomas Paine and also understand the Spiritist doctrine a little better, because it gave me a non-secular, or actually a secular way of viewing Spiritism. If Thomas Paine in class, the guy that we're talking about in class, talks about things that we talk about at the center, then these things are universal truths. These things are real. They are not just exclusive to the Spiritist center and the Spiritist doctrine. So when I read, and what happens is the connections happen. And I don't know if it's my brain or whatever it may be. I don't know. But what I do know is that these connections happen. So why was Thomas Paine so interested in, the plurality of other worlds? Allan Kardec mentioned that. I remember talking about that in Sunday class at the center. Oh, that's very interesting. Let me talk about this with my dad and my mom. Let me continue. So the way I take the journey through the books, the way I take the journey through all the information and knowledge I'm taught in class is guided by my, privilege to have been born in a Spiritist household. So I think that's where it clearly plays out.
Wow, thank you very much for your answer. And I know Kirsten already wrote thanking you for the nice discussion and conversation. And I just want to bring to you in the Gospel according to Spiritism, in John, Jesus said, "Let not your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. There are many dwellings in my Father's house, and if you are not so, I would have told you. For I'm going to prepare the place, and after I have gone and have prepared the place for you, I will return and take you with me, so that there I am, you may be also." So just, again, your connection with the idea of Thomas Paine and the plurality of existences, it's so in line with the concept that the information is all coming from one source. And we're receiving this information through multiple sources, with or without a Spiritist flag attached to them, because we know that the message is coming everywhere for everyone. Because again, like Thomas Paine said, everyone has to have the same chances and opportunities and be treated equally, right? So isn't that amazing?
It is. And the beauty of it is, and I'm so happy that you mentioned it, the idea that this all comes from one source. And I think that would be, if anything, if we don't remember anything particular that Thomas Paine said, the main purpose of this whole talk and ideas behind it is that this all comes from one source, and that system that Paine talks about. And so to remember that we can find it from a French scientist and philosopher, or an English philosopher and inventor, or in any other area. These ideas are so true that they present themselves to us in many different facets, in many different ways. And if we are just able to listen and keep our eyes open and our ears to the ground, we're able to grasp all that information and continue to then reproduce or produce new information if possible. And slowly that allows us to progress intellectually and understanding this doctrine even more. And to bring that all together, we know that we have many different religions. And Thomas Paine talks about the idea of religions and whether or not we'll one day have one religion. And he addresses this. And I think this is very important to remember because we are moving away from the idea of religion, and we are focusing more on spirituality. Mainstream. You hear this on in the media and with friends. And to the future of religions, we believe that the day will come when all beliefs, however diverse in form, but which repose upon the same fundamental principles, God and the immortality of the soul, will form a great unity. That's the Spiritist doctrine. Thomas Paine states that it is certain that in one point all the nations of the earth and all religions agree. They all believe in a God. They may disagree, and there may be redundancies annexed to that belief. But if ever a universal religion should prevail, it should not be by believing anything new, but in getting rid of redundancies and believing as man believed at first. So the idea that whether we are Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, or any other religion, we can come together and believe in this one thing makes it all so much more clear and shows us that we're all heading, it's like a funnel, we're all heading towards one place because all this information does come from one place.
Well, and I think that's like you mentioned really well. This is really one of the most striking messages that we can possibly say today. That we're getting evidence from this from everywhere, and I think it's up to us, like you said really well, to filter all that information and understand that one source, one God that loves us all and is perfect is giving all of this information to us. But I have one more question to you, and I think I really found in your research about this topic that both Thomas Paine and Allan Kardec were persecuted by the Inquisition. Is that right?
Yes. This would be a perfect segue. If we move aside from, we understand that characters in this story called human history have some similarities and some differences, but the notion of Thomas Paine as a person is something we need to remember. Very similar to Allan Kardec, he was very well versed. He enjoyed writing, and they both used writing as a tool. They both used the ideas of science and thinking to come to a conclusion. And as we know, Allan Kardec was persecuted in a different manner, but the books were burned. Anything related to Spiritism was burned. Thomas Paine's persecution was a bit more personal in the sense that a high official named Maximilien Robespierre, who you may have heard of in French Revolution history classes, during the Reign of Terror, he was the main person to begin this Reign of Terror. When the Jacobians were taking over, Robespierre decided that Thomas Paine's ideas were not welcomed because they would attack the status quo. And so he decided to imprison Thomas Paine. And Thomas Paine was imprisoned for about 4 to 5 years, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but I believe that's what it was. And the more striking thing was what happened after he was imprisoned. He was later let out when, obviously, the French government didn't exist, quote unquote. There was this whole revolution, obviously. And this is when he left. And what really saddened me about the man, or the history of the man, Thomas Paine, was how he ended up dying in Rochester, New York. And he was buried there. And I think about 5 people came to his funeral.
Wow.
We don't know. It wasn't there was no viewing or anything. There were no headlines about Thomas Paine dying. There's no interesting story about his last words. Nothing. He simply died, and we do know Allan Kardec died with his wife by his side.
Mm-hmm.
A more, what we could call a more, a better way of dying. But they were both tireless workers who, after fighting for these ideas and being put aside for so long, they actually never saw they never saw their work come to fruition, but they probably know now that it did, and we know that because their work has lasted over time. We're still talking about Thomas Paine. We're still talking about Allan Kardec and their work. So,
wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we need another little break. I know it's such an interesting conversation, and it's such a beautiful morning here in Toronto, Canada, and we're so enlightened by discussing Allan Kardec, Thomas Paine, Jesus, God, and everything all combined together in this very reason-based conversation. So we're going to have another short break, and if anyone has any questions to ask Luis Salazar Jr., please, you can do so through our Facebook, through our chat, through our phone line-in. Please feel welcome to do that, and we'll come with our final segment and with the final questions for Luis Salazar. So hold on for a second, Luis, and we'll be back with you in a minute.
Perfect.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Books of André Luiz. Through the hands of the most prolific medium of all times, Chico Xavier, the spirit doctor André Luiz wrote a series of books that unveil the mechanisms of life and life after life. From the best-selling novel No Solar, Our Home, to And Life Goes On, the reader will find illumination for a fulfilled life on Earth as well as immortal happiness. Check the many titles available at the international distributor, EDI CEI of America. Their website is www.ediceiofamerica.com.
Spread the word. Kardec Radio, to learn more about Spiritism.
Spiritist Network, your gateway to on-demand Spiritist videos. www.spiritistnetwork.com.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio. Traveling to another country? Immigrating elsewhere? Prepare yourself by reading the book Among Brothers of Other Lands, in which several loving and wise spirits wrote through the hands of Chico Xavier and Waldo Vieira, telling all of us the tips and hints of a successful transition to a new land. Buy your copy today at www.ediceiofamerica.com.
Do you want Spiritist books for your children? At Edicei of America, you'll find a collection of them, from the best-selling book Our Father, in which the Spirit May, through Chico Xavier, brought countless poems, stories, and folk tales based on the Lord's Prayer, to the beautiful and educational collection by the author Edailson Salles on Back to School and many others. Buy your copy today at www.ediceiofamerica.com.
And now we return to our program.
Hello, dear listeners. We're here connected through this beautiful radio station this beautiful morning and talking with Luis Salazar. about Thomas Paine and the Spiritist thought. And we had many enlightening thoughts today. And it's important for us just to remind for all those who just got here, we're discussing how Thomas Paine, through the many of his books, including Common Sense and the Rights of Man and The Age of Reason, wrote in 1793, actually brought to us some important messages that go very well in line with what we understand in Spiritism. So we're going to go back with Luis Salazar now with a few more questions. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask us at any time. Hello, Luis. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
Good. So I actually have one more question. So it's always very debatable and questionable how actually Thomas Paine has seen Jesus. Because if you go around and try to research Thomas Paine and the quotes on Jesus, you see a mixed bag of ideas. So how do you think Thomas Paine understood Jesus Christ?
Well, Thomas Paine never really said that Jesus was not, the most enlightened person. I believe sometimes when researching, they're similar to the. Let me backtrack and explain this first. The legacy of Thomas Paine, for some reason that I still have yet to find out, has been tarnished in a very different way, in which he's not necessarily mentioned as a founding father. He's not really put up there. And similar to that, his ideas on religion are twisted. And so if we research his thoughts on Jesus and whatnot, we're going to get, what I had explained before, that, Thomas Paine is an atheist, this and that. But the truth is that Thomas Paine is not a skeptic, as some people believe. He was a very reasoned person, and you cannot get to the thoughts that he got to without believing of the fact that Jesus came and Jesus meant something to the evolution of mankind. So now I think Thomas Paine's criticism has been misconstrued as being towards Jesus when it was in fact towards the writing of the Bible or the accuracy of the Bible. Those are two different things. Thomas Paine never mentioned or directly contradicted anything Jesus said. Thomas Paine did say that some of the writings in the Bible are simply hearsay upon hearsay.
Mm-hmm.
And this is accurate. This is fact. And we do know that. Now, we choose to believe some parts because it's the only account we have. Yet the more important thing is not what Thomas Paine thinks about Jesus as a person, but what Thomas Paine thinks about Jesus and his teachings.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where we find Thomas Paine to be in line with Jesus' teachings. And in Spiritism, we have the idea of there is no without charity there is no salvation.
That's exactly yes. Yeah.
Jesus told us, do well unto others. Treat your brothers and sisters as you would like to be treated. Thomas Paine says, I believe that religious duties consist in doing justice, loving mercy, and endeavoring to make our fellow creatures happy.
Mm-hmm.
So in all this, we see Thomas Paine did very much agree with Jesus. And yet the only problem he may have had, being a very reasoned person, was he did not want to fall into the blind faith of just repeat what has been said about Jesus. He wanted to talk about the actions that we need to take, the truth about Jesus, the fact that we do need to love others. That is what we need to take more than anything from Jesus, and this is what he wanted to articulate.
And that's so right, and that's exactly what we have to keep in our hearts and our minds all the time. And Luis Salazar Jr., it was a great morning. It was such an enlightening conversation. And since we're now approaching the end of our show, I wanted to feel free if you have any final comments, any final ideas that you want to share with us, so we can end this show in a very high note.
Yeah, more than all that has been said, I wanted to share the fact that just as the ideas between Thomas Paine and Allan Kardec come from a source, that one source, the connection that I made, which I thought was a very personal connection, has also been made by at least one other person. And in doing my research for this topic, I found that William Moreira, who actually went back to Brazil, I was trying to contact him but wasn't able to, actually wrote a book bringing together Christ, Thomas Paine, and Allan Kardec. And it's entitled What Christ, Thomas Paine, and Allan Kardec Want You to Know and Religion Doesn't. And and this is what I'll leave you with, is the quote that I picked out from the book, is my conscience, this is William Moreira speaking, my conscience tells me that Paine broke the ice for Kardec's navigation upstream into the difficult water of moral evolution, end quote. And it's beautiful to see how not only did we see a connection between Thomas Paine and Allan Kardec, but this connection has been made by others, and will continue to be made. And we will continue to want to find the truth within the works that we have given to us, and just simply continue to put into practice what we learn. And with that, I thank you for giving me the opportunity to be on your show, and it was a very enjoyable talk.
Thank you. Actually, Luis, we have to thank you to share this time with us and to share all this knowledge that you can bring to us through your research on this topic. I think it fits so well, especially because we just went through the 4th of July and we had a celebration here in Kardec Radio for our anniversary. And now, added on to this, we have a discussion about one of the founding fathers, which, again, some of his history was lost, as you mentioned really well, but still, it's very important for us to keep that in perspective. So, again, thank you very much, Luis. It was an amazing pleasure to have you here, and I hope you can have you here again one more time.
Thank you very much.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So, dear friends, we are coming to the end of another show. And I want to take this moment to let us think a little bit about Spiritism and how Spiritism enlightening us through the works of many contributors, through the consolidation done and research done by Allan Kardec, and through the hands of Chico Xavier mediumship and all that, bringing together to us a body of knowledge that is unseen in human existence, that is so new and novel, that was even questioned by so many when it came. And now we're more and more starting to understand that we're all speaking the same language, although it may be dressed up in different clothes sometimes, but the message is the same. And like Allan Kardec said, it is the future of all religions, is to approach this common understanding of how spiritual life, physical life coming together may help us understand how to be a better person. And before we end the show, I want to tell you that we have a lot of exciting topics and shows coming on Kardec Radio. We have, on July 19th, a show about the Spiritist books for children with Miss Elsa Rossi, President of the British Union of the Spiritist Societies. She's going to give a very nice interview, a very interesting topic on her book, Spiritist Books for Children, Learning How to Pray, and My First Teddy Bear. And 2 weeks from now, July 26th, we're going to have another amazing show, The Collapse of Materialism, with Philip Comella, giving this extraordinary interview on issues that are current to our daily lives. And this is materialism. And how many times does Allan Kardec talk about materialism? And the Spirits talk about materialism in the Spirits book and the Gospel according to Spiritism. So Philip Comella is going to bring that view to us and show. And he's an author and radio show host of Conversations Beyond Science and Religion, and he has a new book titled The Collapse of Materialism, and that's what we're going to discuss in July 26th. And don't forget, my friends, we have Sundays, our Spiritist Awareness segments. Many segments. Spiritist Moment with Kirsten DeMello. We have the Youth Education Spiritism, I'll Be Talking to You, and Spiritism in Your Life. We have the Spiritist Gospel, and many others. So do not miss. This is a chance for you to connect yourself with this amazing knowledge. And also, if you miss a show, don't worry about it. All our shows are available on demand on our website, www.kardecradio.com. And it was a pleasure to be here with you today, filling in for Vanessa and Saloni. And we're going to end our show with our prayer, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Dear Father, Mother, God, we ask that we may understand each day a little bit more of you, of the creative thought that created everything around us. May we comprehend what does that mean to be just and good. May our faith build and get us closer to understanding the perfection that represents God. And may we, as brothers and sisters, living together this incarnation, look up to our Master Jesus and his humble existence in this planet. And maybe internalize the messages of love and charity that were flowing straight from his heart and through his hands, so that all of us can move one little step above in this long stairway of evolution. May our Mother Mary, that received Jesus in this incarnation, also share with us the understanding of a filial love, maternal love. And may all families furnish and let grow inside their houses and homes the principle of love and family. May God bless us all, my friends, and have a wonderful day. And so be it. Thank you, everyone, and I hope to see you again in Kardec Radio next week.
Thank you for listening to Kardec Radio, broadcasting live every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Email us and share your comments at www.kardecradio.com. Until next time, we wish you many blessings.